Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of SuperFantaFi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural fantasy and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the series premiere of Demon Lord 2099. Great series premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So I went into this obviously knowing the premise of it because I think it's such a weird and interesting premise. It's not too many, like, the full-on, straight-up, like, acknowledging, like, mages and magic meeting science fiction. There are versions of science fiction and fantasy that mix, but I feel like I see it way more in anime where they're, like, really, like, now we're combining science fiction with, like, high fantasy. I feel like that doesn't always happen. And so this is a blend of that, and I think it's so interesting. And once again, this is the first time I've ever heard the term reverse isekai, because it's labeled as on Wikipedia. I was like, that's interesting. Of course, there probably have been other reverse isekais, but I only know isekais. I've never seen a reverse isekai before. Maybe I have seen stuff that would be classified as one. I just never thought about it. But either way, I like, right, we get this introduction of we have the mortals versus the immortals. We don't really know. I don't think they ever really explain, like, why they were beefing in the first place. But I mean, it's like, you know, do you ever really need a reason? It's like, oh, you're different, let's go to war. And I mean, to be fair, the Demon Lord was all about conquering, so it's like, oh, the humans are like, no, we'll fight back. But we kind of got this history about the world. What was I'm going to butcher the place. His name is like Elnith. I think it's like the world they're originally from. And then we had like the Demon Lord versus the hero Grimm, and they duked it out, and it came to an end. And I love that, like, when you look at that scene, because I think it's such an interesting thing when your protagonist is like the villain or the bad guy. I think that's so interesting when you're able to like follow them, and it's just, especially because it's going to be an anime, so he's going to be bad, but he's going to be a little kooky. Like a great example of this would be like you take something like a Go-Go Loser Ranger. Obviously, it's like, you know, recency bias because like that's in my head because the anime came out this year, but I just think that's so interesting because like that scene in a different anime would be like the conclusion of the hero triumphed over the villain type of thing. And it's like, yeah, normally that'd be the thing, but then, like, you know, I always love the switcheroo of like, no, you're actually following the villain, because like that speech is like a final speech of like, I can't believe you won. How'd you beat me? It's like, because we humans have such a limited life, we fight to live. And he's like, oh, you something corny and stupid like that? There's no way that nonsense is the reason why you're able to beat me. You're typical, like, once again, it's like your very typical shonen thing of like the human heart is powerful, you know, and friendship and everything. I mean, they didn't really go the friendship route, but still, like, the human spirit is the power. I mean, that's not just shonen. Like a lot of superhero stuff does that as well, but it's just like, it's very prominent in obviously like very like shonen-esque element. But yeah, he dies, and I love that little remark of like, yeah, my greatest rival, and he's like my most hated foe, and he leaves. And then we cut to him being resurrected 500 years by his only remaining ally, Machina. And it's like, she talked about the others have basically scattered around, and you knew something was up the moment she got to Marcus, and she was like really dodgy about it. But yeah, we kind of get like a lore dump of what happened. Like, I thought, like, the way I had to rewind it because she was like 80 years ago. I had to rewind it because I was like, wait, did she say 80 years ago? Or did she say like 80 years after he dies? Like, no, 80 years ago. So the world, once again, this is that premise thing that I knew going in, that basically like their fantastical world blended with kind of what is essentially our world. And they like it was kind of like a dimensional collapse. And I was like, that's so interesting. And so we get this, like, once again, like, cyberpunky fantasy sci-fi series. I'm like, it's such a neat aesthetic to have, like, this very, like, once again, very science fiction, cyberpunk aesthetic, and having magic and fantasy stuff mixed in is kind of interesting, especially because, like, because we have like the immortal type of beings who are not just you have regular humans and you have immortal beings, and it's like they take on many different forms. They can look humanish, they can look demonish and stuff like that. And like I said, like, you see people with ears that kind of look like elves, because it like the demon side, the immortal side isn't just demons. You would think it would be, but it's like, no, it's all like probably more high fantasy non-human people are the immortals. So I just think that's fascinating. But yeah, like, those worlds collided only 80 years ago, it's so interesting in the grand scheme of like 500 years. Only 80 years ago did these worlds collide together, and that's kind of led to some issues. I mean, she even said like 90% of the population died. I don't know if that's across the board of like 90% of Earth's population died, and like if that's in conjunction of like both worlds. So like if you combine all the population of both worlds when they collided, 90% total disappeared, or was it just 90% of Alnith, or is it like 90% of Earth? Like, I'm curious what the like specificity of that is. But yeah, it's just a collision of their technology versus Earth's technology and advancing technology versus like the magic tech of well, I feel like the only time I ever hear the term magic tech, and there's probably been other places, I always think of like some of the Final Fantasies that blend more science fictional, like a 15. I'm sure 13 balances that with like a combination of magic and sci-fi, but I probably like most recently would be like 15 that blend those two worlds together. But yeah, getting introduced to this world where like because of magic and technology, like technology has advanced to even faster degrees than it normally would have on regular Earth. And there's kind of been constant wars and big battles. And there's also an accord where basically the immortal beings are seen as less than. So it's kind of like, oh, they can't be acknowledged as like living beings or whatever. So they're seen as kind of like a species. But because we see people out and about, but I guess it's just like this world has had time to, even though it's only been decades, has had time to kind of, I mean, look at the real world where like, you deal with like some of the human issues we've had based on like race and background, and how that's obviously still an issue to today, but like how much that has progressed and changed over not hundreds of years. It's only been decades, So that is something, that you contend with just even real world wise, which I thought was interesting. So yeah, I thought that was like I said, just world building wise. I'm like, oh, that's just so fascinating, interesting. And even for the demon lord, his dream of like, yeah, let's conquer the world, but Machina had to be like, yeah, so the world you came to like conquer doesn't exist anymore. Because that world kind of died when these worlds collided together, and just kind of like, yeah, everyone just kind of accepts that, even though once again, it's only been like 80 years, and it's just kind of wild to think like. I mean, once again, when you grow up in this world, when you're older in this world, like say you're on the younger side, that's not going to mean nothing to you, because it's going to be interesting for like people who survived those 80 years. It's most likely going to be on the immortal side of things, but like mortals there are probably some mortals who have been around since then who saw like the collision of the worlds and saw that. Once again, that happened in some people's lifetimes. Some people were old enough to remember the world before and what it became afterwards, potentially. Some people might have been kids at the time, type of thing. So it's just, like I said, aside from like your immortals, just talk about on the immortal side of things. So that was fascinating. Then you saw that thing on the back of her neck, and you're like, oh, what's that about? And we find out about that later on. It's familiars, which I think is such an interesting tech conversation, because basically the process in which you do magic, there's an extensive process to it. Like there's like 5 steps to it. You have to they talk about it later on, and this device, the Familia, like removes 3 of those steps so that even regular people, anyone, background or whatever the case may be, can use magic. And this in itself puts the Demon Lord at a disadvantage, because he was always the one, like his specialty was, I don't need to chant for my magic. I'm able to just kind of quick draw my magic. But now, in comparison, his magic, I mean, for one, he's probably lost power after being dead for 500 years and finally being resurrected, so he's not at full strength. But also, like, he's always going to be a step behind other people. So that's going to be an interesting development for him as they're trying to adjust to that. Like, you're already starting off of a back foot. It's not like, oh, you came into this world and you were immensely powerful type of situation. I mean, I guess the indication could be like when he blasted that energy into the sky parted, but it immediately came together. Like, maybe if he was like full strength, that wouldn't have happened. I wonder if there's something to the clouds, the reason why it was like that. I don't know, maybe I'm just being stupid. It just felt like there could be more to that, of like that moment of just not just a display of power, it's also just showing like his power didn't really penetrate the sky like it could have and should have in the past. So he meets that hacker, which is once again that blending of like hacking and magic. She was able to like manipulate the aether to hack those screens. I also love that there was a VTuber up there. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I'm like, is that just like modern day stuff being put into that? Because to be fair, like the light novel is not like older in any capacity. It's like it only started in like January of like 2021, I believe. Which I should talk about that. This was originally a light novel. It has gotten a manga adaptation that's still going on apparently, and so is the light novel. So, but either way, That's what I was trying to. I mean, obviously, VTubers have become more of a thing in more recent years. So I'm wondering, is that something that was even mentioned or talked about at all in the light novel, or was that just something they added in for the anime? Either way, she basically put porn up on the screen because she's an activist because she's like, right, she doesn't like that the what's it, the Ishimura uh heavy magic industry is what it is. IHMA. Uh, IMHHMI. God, I'm butchering that. I'm so sorry. That took me way too long to get that right. Either way, uh, and there are restrictions she has, and she's all about the internet being free. But I love that montage of her explaining it, and just every different position she's in, and the demon lord's just sitting there listening to her explain everything, and you're just seeing people walk by looking at her like, "What are you doing?" You know, because she's going into the technicality of it all. But yeah, he gets pointed towards IHMI. I cannot get that right. I'm not going to get that right. I'm probably going to end up forgetting that by the time the next episode comes out. But we find out Marcus is the leader of it. And I love that they have their own little mascot. And I love, what's her name? Kinohara. Marcus's secretary. It's all about that. You know, she's like, oh yeah, like he's super cute and everything. And it's like, huh. And even the Demon Lord, was it Voltal? I haven't even been calling him by his name. Was like, oh, that's a unique creature. But yeah, he meets Marcus, and Marcus is like, oh, I always hated you. Like, I had to be subjugated to you because you were more powerful to me. But now you've fallen so far behind because of me and the advancement in May. I'm going to be the new demon lord of this world. You are a relic, and ends up attacking him and trying to kill him. And I love Kinohara shows up later on. It's like, oh, should we talk more about Ishimori? And he's just like, yeah, just tell whatever ideas you have. And it's just like, yeah, I just had my big villain moment. You kind of stepped on it a little bit, but okay, whatever. You know, that's all she concerns about. I mean, obviously she's a badass with like the sword she draws. Because Marcus had even brought up the fact is like, right, you were bleeding. Yes, your wound healed like after a couple seconds, but normally whenever you get struck, your wound would heal just after the attack. Like, at the same time you're getting attacked, you would have already healed. So your healing process, you're far behind everyone. Even normal dudes are giving you trouble on the street, and that shouldn't be possible. But once again, everyone's got a leg up technologically wise. And I love the stipulation that Marcus is like, oh, I made it so that this technology cannot be compatible with you. Machina has it. So it's like only him, because it's like, I didn't want to take the chance that if you ever did get resurrected, that you would have that advantage. So I wanted to strip you of ever having that advantage. So he's always going to be at a disadvantage to everyone in this world, despite as powerful as he is. I'm also curious if his fight with Graham wounded him so much that his powers aren't fully... I mean, he only just woke up from the resurrection, so maybe... I'm curious, like, what the process he has to go through to kind of get back the amount of power he had. We also see what appears to be Graham alive and well. Not unless that ends up being like his descendant or something, but we saw him in like the opening where like you're skating around the city. That's not going to be like the proper opening for the show. I'm sure that might be the same song they use going forward, but like the footage they use is just actually just, you know, giving you like a bird's eye view of the city and stuff. But also the Volto like walked past someone he thought was Graham. So the question is, did like Graham become an immortal? Like, why is he still alive? Did he get resurrected the same way or something? So, but yeah, like Machina is kind of blaming herself because it's like, I didn't properly prepare you and explain how things were. I didn't tell you about Marcus's betrayal. But Volto's like, yeah, but even if I knew, I would have just gone to see him even more just to see it for myself. So they go to her building, which seems to be in a very run-down part of town. And he's like, oh my God, this place is perfect. And he's like looking at it. She's like, this way. And he's like, oh, this way. I'm like, yeah, because you're thinking the entire building is her. It's an apartment building. And she has a very tiny apartment. And she's like, I don't get paid much. So it's like, and she's just kind of, I'm so sorry. And he hugs her, being like, your loyalty has shown through. Like, even after all these years, you've been dedicated to me. You still show loyalty to me. You're the only one that was there. I mean, because she and another were let go. Because one of them stayed behind to make sure her and another person could get away, because they're the only two that had the potential of resurrecting Voltol. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where things kind of go. I think it's interesting we kind of end on a sour note of like, right, your grand return and you kind of get stomped in the ground by your former ally, now turned greatest enemy and threat. So the demon lord surviving in this world. Because I think I watched part of the trailer. I think I avoided watching all of it, but I wonder is this going to be one of those things of how is he going to make it do and survive in this city? Well, not just this city, obviously it's the entire world, but how do you adjust to this? How do you make your way through a world like this? Especially, once again, you're kind of on the lower tier because you're always going to be a step behind people, but how do you compensate for that? I should also note, when he first summoned his sword in the opening the opening part of the episode back like 500 years ago, I could not help but be like, that sword reminds me so much of Sparta from Devil May Cry. Specifically, Sparta has a sword called Sparta, if you're unfamiliar with Devil May Cry, and it kind of reminded me of that design. I think that sword's always kept that same design throughout the games that it's popped up in as, and I don't think its design has changed necessarily. I don't think it has. But either way, it just kind of gave me that same vibe with some of its design, but maybe that's just me. Either way, like I said, I'm excited to see where this series goes going forward. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.